Hey my friends, I'm Sarah, so welcome back to Thrills and Kills Booktube. So I'm back. I have had a bit of a break from social media, from reading in general. Today I'm here to talk to you about a book that I just finished and I really loved it, but this is the only book I've read for all of November, and today is November 21st. So I've been quite open and honest on this channel that I do suffer from mental illness, specifically bipolar disease, and I had a really great month in October, and I didn't quite realize that I was slipping into a manic phase, and then for November I kind of came back down. So it just makes it really hard to sit still and read and stay focused. So I'm hoping I'm on the upswing now. All that being said, we're here to talk about a book that I recently finished. Loved it. Leech by Hiron Ennis. So this is a debut novel. Let me just start by saying this book is weird. So therefore this discussion, this book chat, it might be weird. It might be all over the place because this is one of those books, it's just really hard to kind of, first of all, grasp what's happening and then like organize your thoughts and be able to verbalize those thoughts in a way that's cohesive, concise, that makes sense. So we're gonna try. I was not sure I was gonna like this book, which is why I got it from the library, because I thought, well, if I don't like it, at least I didn't spend the money, because this is not my typical type of book. It was sort of marketed as being like a gothic horror meets sci-fi, and I'm not really a sci-fi reader. That's why I was a little bit hesitant. So first of all, can you see this beautiful cover? It's just gorgeous. Whoever did that artwork did a fantastic job. So yeah, like I said, this is a debut author. The author is actually in medical school, and I did a little bit of Googling. They are actually, I believe, going for pathology or maybe even forensic pathology. So as I get to discussing this, you'll realize there's a lot of medical themes in this book, and it was just fantastic to have someone who is in the medical profession sort of bring that to life, which kudos to them for being able to be in med school and write a book at the same time. I went to nursing school and I certainly did not have time to be writing a book, let alone a book that was very good. So let me read the blurb to you so you know what the heck we're even talking about, and keep in mind I told you this book was weird. In an isolated chateau as far north as north goes, the Baron's doctor has died. The doctor's replacement has a mystery to solve, discovering how the Institute lost track of one of its many bodies. For hundreds of years, the Interprovincial Medical Institute has grown by taking root in young minds and shaping them into doctors, replacing every human practitioner of medicine. The Institute is here to help humanity, to cure and to cut, to cradle and protect the species from the apocalyptic horrors their ancestors unleashed. In the frozen north, the Institute's body will discover a competitor for its rung at the top of the evolutionary ladder. A parasite is spreading through the Baron's castle, already a dark pit of secrets, lies, violence, and fear. The two will make war on the battlefield of the body. Whichever wins, humanity will lose again. Sounds weird, right? So if I was trying to describe sort of what genre this book falls into, it's part horror, part gothic, definitely sci-fi, like it leans heavily onto that, body horror, dark fantasy, steampunk even, and some of the descriptions of like mechanical stuff. Maybe a little bit like dystopian, post-apocalyptic, because it makes reference to things that happened in the past, almost like a great war or something happened to wipe out the human species, and these are sort of like quasi-humans. And then I was thinking about it, and it was almost like, remember Philip Pullman's The Golden Compass? It was a series. If you grew up like in the 90s, early 2000s, you know what I'm talking about. So it's almost like The Golden Compass meets a parasitic plague outbreak and then a bunch of doctors thrown in. Because, you know, The Golden Compass, and there's like there's fantasy going on. Obviously, it's like a version of the human world, but not the human world in the way that we know it. It takes place up north, very cold. So that's kind of my best way to describe it to something. So if that sounds interesting, I would recommend this book. Now, there is a doctor, and we don't learn their name. And this narrator, this doctor, it's sort of like gender fluid, or it's purposely made known that we don't know the gender of this doctor. And so this doctor, it starts off by they're on a train and they're going north to this town because there is a doctor who specifically is in this town up north and takes care of the Baron and the Baron's family in their chateau. It's referred to as the chateau throughout the book. And the doctor has died, and died under very odd circumstances. Because the Institute, it is a hive mind. There is a parasite that sort of flourished once the humans were gone, and it has found a way to embed itself into the minds of young people, teach them to become physicians, and then sends them out to do its bidding and to take care of people, but also to do its bidding. And because it's the hive mind, it's a collective consciousness of, I don't know, hundreds, thousands, I'm not sure, of bodies at any one point in time. So it's very interesting because technically it's, first person, one narrator, but then interspersed there'll be thoughts that are there'll be thoughts that are coming into our main narrator doctor from the hive mind from all across the country or the world. It doesn't quite say if it's like the whole world or just the country or whatnot. Or if the main doctor has a question, like, they're examining the dead doctor's body and they're not quite sure what it is. It's very interesting because there'll be a body maybe in the medical library in the capital city, and it'll shoot in and say, have you thought about this? Or it's just very interesting how the narrator is getting thoughts. Like, that's how I imagine it. They're getting thoughts sent to their brain from the other brains in the hive mind. So that is very different. I've never read a book like that before. So anyways, the doctor arrives in this town that's very, very cold, freezing cold. Like, you step outside for too long and you could die. And heads up to the chateau and meets the family. So there's the Baron, his son Didier, Didier's wife Helene, and then they've got twin girls who I think are about like 10 or 11. There is a few servants. There's a main servant, Emile, who is mute, or at least chooses not to talk. And there is the dead doctor. And so our doctor, the narrator, wants to start in immediately on doing an autopsy. And once they start doing the autopsy, they just find very, very odd stuff. And so if you do not like body horror, there are a few scenes that'll make you probably squeamish. It's not throughout the entire book. It definitely is like isolated scenes, but the autopsy scene being one of those. So I'm just letting you know, I'm warning you. If you've got triggers around that, there may be a few pages here and there that you're like reading like between your fingers. Now, being a medical professional myself, I loved the way those scenes were written because the author even used medical terms like talking about laterality, like dorsal, anterior. I think they're not so difficult that a layperson can't understand, especially given context clues. So it's not written at a level that you won't understand what's going on. I think they wove it in very well. But I definitely appreciated it. Where this book excels, I think, is the atmosphere. I did not know there were so many ways to write about the cold, and I definitely felt cold reading this book because it all takes place up in the north. It's almost like, think about like the Arctic Circle. It's that cold where they're at. And just the way that the author describes, just like that oppressive cold. Like, right now, it starts getting dark around 5. Like, imagine it's like that all day long, just darkness, and just, like I said, oppressive colds, like down to your bones. And no matter what you do, you can't get warm. I thought the author did a fantastic job with that. And then the descriptions of the chateau, and it used to obviously be such a majestic chateau for a very rich family, and although the Baron's family obviously does still have money, it's sort of crumbling. It's long since seen better days. I also felt that the writing itself was really great. However, it will depend on what kind of books that you like. So this is a very dense book. For only being 320 pages, it's very dense. It's hard to read it quickly or to read a whole lot in one sitting. The content is dense. The themes are like just dense. It's one of those books where you'll read like maybe a few chapters, you got to put it down and really think about and internalize what you just read. How do you feel about that? Because we'll get to that. There's some heavy themes and topics discussed. And the writing is actually, it's pretty small. Can you see that? So yeah, like I said, it's just a dense book, and their writing style, it's not quite like reading a Victorian, but it is a little bit sort of like reading like Frankenstein or something like that. Particularly if you've read Gothic novels, like let's say you've read Rebecca, kind of like that writing style. So it goes really well with the themes and the setting of the book. Sorry, I had to look at my notes. And to add to that, there's some medical terms that I don't think people will struggle with, but it does sort of add another layer of, it's almost like a sophisticated, like smart way of writing, but I mean that in a good way. Let me read a few examples because it just is so descriptive, and I just like the way this author writes. So I'm gonna read you a little excerpt, and this totally is like a jab at least the American healthcare system, like our private, like profit over patient system that we have, which I was like chuckling reading this because I was like, yep, that is so true. So this is our narrator, who is unnamed, but a physician, and they are at dinner with the family that they care for, this baron in the chateau. Wherever we are, we want to be somewhere else, I mumble, staring at the centerpiece, which with every passing minute I am sure is only a pig's skull with dried flowers placed in the empty orbits. We wish to be everywhere at once. Of course you'd say something like that, the Baron laughs. Every new province, some wicked sod plants a flag and means a whole new province full of diseases you get paid to fix. Even better if they spread back to Inultis, that's the capital city. You can't have people be too well. If no one needs bleeding, no one needs a leech. Perhaps you're right. I'm too tired to find offense in these words. Well, there won't be any new provinces for a while yet. So he's talking, like, oh, we won't be able to get more money because there won't be any new provinces to colonize. So I really like that bit because it definitely was a jab, like I said, at the American healthcare system. Like, oh, if nobody's sick, you have no one to treat. So because there's more profits in people being sick and being hospitalized and getting these advanced treatments, you don't make money off keeping people well, off of preventative medicine, primary care, that sort of a thing. So let me get off my soapbox for a little bit because, like I said, I'm a nurse, so I can be very passionate about those topics. And then there was one more little excerpt I wanted to read. Because here's another thing. So we're discussing this in 2022. Obviously, we just went through a pandemic, and I don't know when the book was originally thought of. It's reading interviews with the author. It seems like they've had this idea for years and only just recently finished and published it. But there's definitely similarities to the outbreak of COVID, because there is this outbreak of this new parasite up in this northern town, and it has gotten into the chateau and obviously infected someone, and now everyone's freaking out, kind of like March 2020. Quote, we have to get rid of her, burn the mat, burn everything, burn every object in this room, douse the walls in peroxide, lock the door, no, nail it shut. I want everything in here bleached or burned. Get rid of your clothes, get rid of mine, throw everything in the fucking furnace. And I was just thinking back, because I still worked in the hospital through most of 2020, and I would literally come home and take my clothes and my shoes off in the garage, put them in a plastic bag, and then like go throw that in the laundry room and shower before I even like said hello to my husband or pet my dogs. And we were using peroxide to help sanitize masks, and so it just really stuck with me because I was like, yep, I know that paranoia. I've lived that paranoia. So it was just a really powerful little excerpt for me particularly. Now, let's talk about something I wasn't quite, I don't want to say I disliked it. I am just not sure how I feel about it yet. The ending. It did seem a little bit anticlimactic, but not every book needs to have like a wham bam, like fireworks show of a climax at the end. It's more that I just don't think I got it yet, and maybe I need to reread the last few pages or just sit and think about it, kind of let it marinate and see what I think, because the author was obviously trying to say something it was just, the ending was just weird. And so I could tell like, all right, they obviously want me to pick up on something, but I'm not getting it. So like I said, I wouldn't even say I dislike it. It's just something I got to go back and figure out. Let's talk about some of the themes in this book. There are many, and I'm sure I didn't even touch on all of them. And they are just, like I said, a lot of food for thought, which is why the book is just dense and it's hard to read it in a few days or just to like binge read it. So it definitely talks about healthcare and medicine, as you notice with the little passage I just read. And it touches on, so who gets access to care? Sort of the haves versus the have-nots. So the Baron and his family, the doctor lives with them in the chateau. And if the doctor gets any extra time, they go out into this village to care for the other people. But in the village is sort of like a spiritual leader, but like a shaman, like witch doctor, like naturopathic type person who was indigenous, because this village was colonized, so is taking care of the indigenous people, but it's like old medicine, versus this doctor has come from the capital city and is like the peak of human knowledge of medical technology, right? So it definitely brings up, like I said, topics of who gets access to care, and if you have more money, you get better care because you can pay for it, right? Money is no object. And we definitely see that, I'll get to it in a second, we definitely see that in the type of care that the Baron specifically is getting. It also talks about, so who gets to control knowledge? So there are multiple points in the book where it references like previous civilization. That's why it sort of feels like it's a post-apocalyptic, I can't say that word, or dystopian. And there used to be people who were doctors, healers, providers outside of the Institute, but now it's a monopoly. It's only the Institute who trains and provides physicians to go out to the various towns and cities and provide care for people. So obviously that can be an issue if it's just one body of knowledge. How much is too much is another thing that comes up. So I've personally worked in the ICU before, so I've seen this before, right? Like, so modern medicine is so great. And in this book, the technology they have is so great, but to what point? At what point do we say this body is failing and it's, quality over quantity? So going back to who gets care, the Baron, it's very clearly that the Baron's body is failing, but they make multiple references to the Baron's going to outlive everybody because the Baron has money to replace body parts. So this is where it sort of becomes steampunk in a way, in sci-fi, because it references tubing and machinery and gears. However, it's referencing bodily functions. So they have to bring him downstairs to dinner every night. And one time he's like, they left my colon upstairs. Well, because it was like a drain in a machine. Or his kidneys are like another type of machinery that they have to hook up and disconnect. So he has all this advanced machinery, but then there is someone in the town who's sort of like a mechanic or an engineer, and they just have one little piece of plastic tubing that goes into the heart to make sure his heart continues to function. And there is a shortage and they can't find any more of this tubing, so he has like 6 months to live because that's all that one tube will last. What is really cool is if you work in healthcare, you can totally see how this translates to real stuff that we have. So the guy with the little tube in his heart very clearly is an LVAD, a left ventricular assist device. You can have this thing implanted in your heart. And if anyone's watching this who has worked in cardiology, the way it's described replacing it is like verbatim how you would replace a drive line. Obviously it didn't go into sterile technique, but it was like, yeah, that's a drive line and they're replacing it. That makes sense. That's an LVAD. When it's talking about the Baron, it's very clear there's some sort of ventilator happening and there's some sort of CRRT, so continuous renal replacement therapy. It's just continuous dialysis. I thought that was really cool and I was nerding out on it. Obviously you would only pick up on that if you were probably in the medical field and knew about that stuff. All right, moving on. So it definitely discusses colonization and is critical of colonization. So in multiple ways. Number one, the literal colonization of people's bodies and minds. So the Institute is literally a parasite that it goes out and it finds young people, maybe like 12, 13 years old, that would be a good specimen to be turned into a physician. And they get injected with the parasite, and the parasite literally takes over their mind, rewires like neural pathways, and this person totally forgets who they were before they became a body at the Institute. They do not have consent in this process. They are picked, and it is what it is. So it discusses consent, bodily autonomy, and obviously colonization of bodies. It also discusses colonization in the way we think of it of, new territories. So this town up north is a colony. It's been there for a while, but it's an ongoing colony. So again, there's this baron who it's not quite clear if he owns the town, but he obviously has some level of authority. And then there are the have-nots who tend to be either indigenous people or they are descendants of indigenous people. And they have to labor down in these mines to harvest the stuff called wheatgrass, which is what's making the baron so rich. And unfortunately, much like coal mining, it's very dangerous. There are mine collapses, people do die and get seriously hurt. Meanwhile, the baron is sitting in his house by his fireplace, nice and safe. So it definitely, like I said, it is very critical of colonization. Within that, there's also racism because the indigenous people are seen as less than obviously the baron and his family. Like I said, bodily autonomy. Consent is also brought up. Those are the main themes. When I was doing some research, I read an interview with the author, and this was a line I really liked. The author said, "The most successful parasites are those that remain unseen." And I don't want to discuss the parasite that they find in the dead doctor's body and what the struggle is with the parasite that's the Institute, because if you're going to read the book, I want you to find it out yourself. It definitely is a parasite that remains unseen, both in the human body and in where it originates from. It's just very interesting. There is a scene where it is creepy crawling around almost like a tarantula, and it was so gross. But again, it's just a few pages. So even if you don't do well with body horror, you can get through it. It's not the whole book. Okay, so that is Leech by Hiron Ennis. I don't quite know that it's a 5-star, only because I haven't quite decided how I feel about the ending. I do think this is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. It is up there with Revelator, which was also a very weird book. So in the past, I would not say I like particularly weird books, but I don't know. I think I need to start giving them more of a try. I'll probably never try House of Leaves, though. That's on a whole other level of weirdness. But yeah, if you like sci-fi, if you like medical mystery type stuff, I don't know, like I said, Philip Pullman, The Golden Compass, then I think you'll really like it. It says only 320 pages. I found it to be extremely interesting. Just give yourself enough time to work through it slowly and give yourself time to sit down and think about it, because I think you'll get the most out of it. I think if you just breeze through it and try to read it in 2 days like you normally could a book of 300 something pages, you're not gonna like it, because you really need to take time to simmer, to marinate, and to pick up on all the little details. All right, so that is everything I have today. It's either going to be Thanksgiving, or it's about to be Thanksgiving, or the day after, I don't know, but this video will be going up the week of Thanksgiving. So if you are in the US, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. And if you're not in the US, well, Thanksgiving, the feeling of gratitude, that transcends nationalities. So I hope you all have a good day as well. Stay spooky, friends.